The flashing red and blue lights washed over my quiet ranch, painting the fields in uneasy color. That Saturday evening, 3 patrol cars rumbled up my gravel driveway, their tires crunching heavily on the stones, disrupting the serenity of what was supposed to be a peaceful barbecue with friends. The strobe effect of the emergency bars turned the oak trees into silhouetted monsters, casting long, dancing shadows across the property I had worked my entire life to acquire. Standing on my front porch, I wasn't greeted as a homeowner or a tax-paying citizen. I was illuminated by the harsh glare of spotlights, treated like a fugitive on his own land. To my left, standing near the pristine white hood of her luxury SUV, was a woman I had come to know as Brenda. To the rest of the neighborhood, she was the HOA President, a title she wore like a crown in a dictatorship of her own making. She stood with her arms crossed triumphantly, a look of smug satisfaction plastered across her face as she pointed an accusatory finger directly at my chest. An officer, his hand resting instinctively near his holster, barked orders for me to keep my hands visible. The tension in the air was thick, suffocating, and charged with the potential for violence. Brenda had called 911, screaming that I was armed, dangerous, and threatening her life. It was a fabrication so vile it made my blood boil, yet I forced myself to remain statue still. My guests, terrified, watched from the patio, their drinks forgotten. But as the officer stepped onto the porch, aggressive and ready to take control, I didn't feel the dread that Brenda expected me to feel. Instead, I felt a cold, hard resolve. Because Brenda had made a catastrophic miscalculation. In her blind pursuit of petty authority, she had failed to realize one critical detail. The property management company she answered to, the very source of her power, was a subsidiary of the corporation I founded. I wasn't just the rancher next door. I was her boss's boss, and she was about to learn that accountability is a heavy gavel when it finally falls. To understand how a quiet Saturday night devolved into a felony stop, we have to rewind 2 weeks. It began on a Tuesday afternoon, when I was repairing a section of fencing along the southern perimeter of my 40-acre ranch. My property predated the Heritage Hills subdivision by nearly 20 years. I was an island of unincorporated agricultural land surrounded by a sea of cookie-cutter McMansions. I was blissfully outside their jurisdiction, or so I thought. I heard the crunching of tires and looked up to see Brenda's SUV pull off the main road and onto my private dirt track. She stepped out, clutching a clipboard like a weapon, her eyes scanning my barn, my truck, and my pastures with undisguised disdain. She didn't introduce herself. She simply marched up to me and stated, "You need to paint that barn. It's an eyesore and violates the community color palette. We require Sandstone Beige or Desert Taupe. Red is not an approved color." I wiped the sweat from my forehead, leaning on my post-hole digger, and politely explained that I wasn't part of Heritage Hills. I told her my deed was clear. My land was agricultural, and I had no HOA covenant attached to my title. She laughed a sharp, dismissive sound that grated on the nerves. "The HOA expanded its sphere of influence last month," she declared, thrusting a piece of paper toward me. "We have jurisdiction over all properties bordering the development to maintain property values. You have 7 days to paint the barn and mow this field, or you will be fined." I refused to take the paper. I told her to get off my property. She sneered, snapped a photo of me with her phone, and warned, "You don't want to go to war with me. I always win." Then she stormed back to her car and sped off, leaving a cloud of dust and a sense of unease in her wake. The war she promised arrived in my mailbox 3 days later. It started with a formal notice of violation on official letterhead from Summit Property Solutions, the management firm that handled Heritage Hills. The letter demanded compliance and listed a $500 fine. I chuckled and tossed it in the trash. 2 days later, another letter arrived, then another. The fines escalated. $1,000 for unauthorized livestock, my horses. $500 for improper vehicle storage, my tractor. And $2,000 for failure to comply. It was harassment, pure and simple. But Brenda didn't stop at paper threats. I came home one evening to find a drone hovering outside my second-story bedroom window, its camera lens peering into my private life. I rushed outside and saw Brenda's car parked on the shoulder of the public road, the controller in her hands. When I shouted at her, she simply rolled up her window and drove away. The final straw came when I found a heavy-duty padlock on my front gate knot, my lock, but hers. A sticker slapped on the gate read "Property seized for non-payment of dues." She had locked me out of my own home. I used bolt cutters to remove it, my indignation turning into a cold, strategic anger. I took the lock and the letters to my study and started digging. I looked up Summit Property Solutions. The name was familiar. I pulled up my own corporate portfolio. Sure enough, Summit was acquired by my holding company 3 years ago as part of a larger merger. I was the majority shareholder and chairman of the board for the parent company. Brenda was terrorizing the man who signed the paychecks. Of the people she purported to, I didn't get mad. I got on the phone. I called the regional director of Summit, a man named David, who had been with me for a decade. When I explained what his HOA president was doing, I could hear him hyperventilating on the other end of the line. We hatched a plan. I told him to be ready. I told him to bring HR, and I told him to wait for my signal. That signal came tonight. I was hosting a barbecue playing classic rock at a reasonable volume when Brenda arrived to shut it down. She didn't come to talk. She came to destroy. She pulled up, saw the guests, and immediately dialed 911. I heard her screaming lies into the phone. "He's got a gun. He's waving it at me. I fear for my life." It was a performance worthy of an Oscar, and it was a felony. That brings us back to the flashing lights. The police sergeant finished patting me down, finding nothing but my wallet and phone. "Where's the weapon?" he asked, his voice stern but confused. "There is no weapon," I said calmly, "and there is no HOA jurisdiction. But there is a witness. I'd like you to speak to—" I pointed to the end of the driveway. Just as the tension peaked, a sleek black sedan glided past the police cruisers, followed by a second car. David stepped out, looking impeccable in a suit, despite the late hour. Flanked by 2 serious-looking women from the corporate legal department. Brenda, who was busy recounting her fabricated story to a junior officer, froze. She recognized the logo on the car. She recognized David. Her face drained of color, turning a ghostly shade of pale. David walked right past the police, ignored Brenda completely, and extended a hand to me. "Mr. Chairman," he said, loud enough for everyone too. "Here, I apologize for the delay. We brought the files you requested." The police sergeant looked from David to me, putting the pieces together. "You know this man?" the sergeant asked David. "Know him," David replied, turning to glare at Brenda. "He owns the company that manages this HOA. He is the ultimate authority." Over the entire organization, the silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the crackle of the police radio. Brenda's jaw dropped. She sputtered, trying to find words, but none came. David turned to her, his voice dripping with professional disdain. "Brenda Whitfield," he announced, holding up a termination letter. "You have utilized your position to harass the chairman of the board. You have falsified documents, you have trespassed, and you have embezzled authority you do not possess. As of this moment, you are terminated from your position as HOA President. We are also dissolving the current board for complicity and launching a forensic audit into your spending." Brenda began to shake, her arrogance evaporating into thin air. You can't do this," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm the president." David stepped closer. "Not anymore. You're a liability, and you're fired." But the night wasn't over. The police sergeant, realizing he had been used as a weapon in a personal vendetta, stepped forward with a new demeanor. He looked at the frantic woman who had wasted his officer's time and endangered everyone present. "Ma'am," the sergeant said, pulling his handcuffs from his belt, "turn around and place your hands behind your back." Brenda shrieked, looking to me. "For mercy, please. We're neighbors. You can't let them take me." I looked at her, then at the terrified look in her eyes, and felt nothing but the satisfaction of justice served. "I'm not your neighbor, Brenda," I said softly, my voice carrying over the idling engines. "I'm your boss, and you just filed a false police report claiming an armed threat. That's a felony." The sound of the handcuffs clicking shut was the definitive end to her reign of terror. She was guided into the back of the cruiser, weeping loudly, stripped of her dignity and her power in one fell swoop. The flashing lights that had arrived to intimidate me now served as her escort to the county jail. In the aftermath, the fallout was swift and brutal. Brenda was charged with filing a false report, misuse of emergency services, and harassment. The forensic audit ordered by David revealed she had been using HOA funds to pay for personal landscaping and gas for her SUV, adding embezzlement to her list of legal woes. I sued her in civil court for the damage to my gate and the emotional distress caused by the swatting attempt. The court ruled in my favor, and the financial judgment was catastrophic for her. She was forced to sell her home in Heritage Hills, the very kingdom she had tried to rule, to pay the legal fees and restitution. She left town quietly, humiliated and broken. The new HOA board, appointed by my company, immediately sent a formal letter of apology and recognized my property's independence. Peace returned to the ranch. The crickets chirped, the stars shone brightly, and the only lights on my driveway were the ones I turned on myself. It was a harsh lesson, but a necessary one. Brenda learned the hard way that when you try to use power to bully the innocent, you better make sure you aren't picking a fight with the person who holds the keys to the castle. Proof that power, when abused, always comes with a price.